Good afternoon. And Andres, thank you very much for that introduction. Also, I want to thank Susan and Eric and the rest of the council for this opportunity. It really is a privilege to be with you today for the 47th Washington Conference of the Americas. For nearly 50 years, you've held this conference. The council has underscored what we also know to be true. The Western Hemisphere is and always will be a top priority for the United States. Beyond a priority, it is a privilege to work in this hemisphere, because here we practice foreign policy alongside partners whose interests are directly tied to ours. With few exceptions, we are a democratic hemisphere today. Our cooperation reflects the ties between our institutions, our economies, our families, and our cultures. More than 50 million Americans of Hispanic descent or Caribbean heritage live in the United States. There are now more Spanish speakers in the United States than in Spain. And as you all well know, the Americas are home to some of the most important markets for our companies. Strong and healthy regional economies are good for both the United States and for our hemisphere. That is why this administration is committed to expanding security and fostering economic growth in the region. Together with our partners, we are pursuing a shared vision, a secure, democratic, and free hemisphere, a region with law and order along our borders, where transnational criminal networks and pathways for illicit activity are shut down, and a region where terrorism cannot take root. This region can be known for its peace and prosperity, one that can and will face global challenges together. The State Department welcomes your partnership as we continue to engage in this hemisphere. The private sector is a critical voice and force in helping us reach our goals. The Americas represent a key market for U.S. exports. Fortunately for us, the United States is the preferred business partner for most countries in the Western Hemisphere. Nearly half of all goods and services exported from the United States, $669 billion worth, go north and south. That's 3 times more than we, the United States, export to China, Japan, and India combined. With this hemisphere, we are supporting the President's 4 trade priorities: promoting U.S. sovereignty, enforcing U.S. trade laws, leveraging U.S. economic strength to expand our goods and services exports, and protecting intellectual property rights. We are reviewing existing trade agreements and negotiating new bilateral ones to ensure the benefits to the United States are clear. But our work together expands beyond trade agreements. We are also supporting entrepreneurs, fostering innovation, and supporting education. We are broadening opportunities for women in business. For example, President Trump and Prime Minister Trudeau inaugurated the Canada-United States Council for the Advancement of Women Entrepreneurs and Business Leaders just in February. We are promoting energy diversification. Regulatory frameworks must be friendly to investors. This is what will drive development and create new opportunities for globally competitive U.S. energy firms. Many of you have probably worked with our dedicated officers at embassies and consulates in the region. They have helped countless companies, maybe even some of you, to promote U.S. business interests through commercial advocacy and policy engagement. We understand that for you to do business, we must work to facilitate legitimate trade and travel between the United States and the hemisphere. There is nothing more important to us than the safety and security of the United States. Our vision is a hemisphere home to a legal, safe, and orderly movement of goods and people. To do this, we are fighting transnational criminal networks and preventing terrorists from entering the United States. Again, this is a shared goal with our partners. We cannot do this alone. Together, we are working to deter criminal activity, strengthen law enforcement and the rule of law, and provide alternatives to delinquency and gangs. I know many of you in this room have watched the Hemisphere closely for years, and others do business here every day. I'd like to outline some specific priority areas to illustrate how we are working to further our shared goals. In Colombia, we have seen events in this hemisphere over the last year that many would not have thought possible in their lifetimes, such as its historic peace deal, which ended the region's longest-running armed conflict. We are supporting Colombia as it implements the peace agreement with the FARC. President Santos is coming to Washington next week, May 17th to 19th. We will talk about our work with Colombia to build a robust counter-narcotics effort and how to address the spike in coca production of the last few years. This effort will require creating opportunities in the illicit economy and confronting the conflict's root causes. One way in which we pursue this strategy is by supporting landmine removal in previous conflict zones through the Global Demining Initiative for Colombia. Mexico and Canada are vital partners for us as well. Despite what you may hear, the relationships we have are good. Mexico and Canada understand we have to refresh some of the agreements that have governed our relationship. Both countries are ready to re-engage in a good faith effort with us. Mexico was Secretary Tillerson's first overseas trip. He has met with his Mexican counterpart multiple times since beginning his job here at the State Department. But so have our other cabinet secretaries in many areas of government, from commerce to treasury to agriculture to homeland security to the Attorney General. We have a robust and comprehensive relationship with Mexico that we are fully engaged on. And this reflects the cooperation that has been the hallmark of our relationship with Mexico for most of the last 2 decades. We work with our colleagues in the Mexican government on priority issues, such as ensuring the smooth management of our almost 2,000-mile border and our $500 billion economic relationship. Together, we are fighting the transnational criminal organizations that smuggle drugs and exploit vulnerable Central American migrants and their dangerous journey north. While we have some differences as we update our trade and security relationships, we manage them as friends and allies, openly, transparently, and with mutual respect. Our strategic interest lies in that broad relationship. The next step in these conversations will come on May 18th when Secretary Tillerson will host a meeting with Mexico on combating organized crime. We will also, with Mexico, co-host a conference in Miami along with the Department of Homeland Security on Central American prosperity and security. Our companies also have deep ties with Canada, our close ally and partner. Every day, approximately 380,000 people cross this border, as does approximately $2 billion in trade. Prime Minister Trudeau was one of the first foreign leaders to visit President Trump when he traveled to Washington on February 13th. The two leaders have spoken on several times since then and have a close and respectful relationship. On energy, Canada is a key partner as we work together to strengthen North American energy security and competitiveness. Canada is one of the largest importers of U.S. energy, including electricity and natural gas. In 2015, it was our largest supplier of crude oil imports. And just as we're in touch with Mexico, we are also in regular contact with Canada as we seek to update NAFTA through renegotiation to the benefit of all 3 countries. Looking south, another priority for us is addressing the root drivers of migration originating in Central America. To ensure the U.S. southern border and protect American citizens, we must address the security, governance, and economic drivers of irregular migration and illicit trafficking. Our efforts in these areas complement the many reform initiatives in the region, including the Northern Triangle's own Alliance for Prosperity. For example, the Lourdes Colon area of El Salvador used to be one of the most dangerous areas in that country. In the last 8 years, we've trained more than 900 police officers to help them conduct better investigations, to interact better with their communities. And we launched a police athletic league program that benefited more than 1,000 at-risk youth. The aim, to reduce homicides in Lourdes Colon. And we did it. Compared to 2009, when the program started, there's been a 61% drop in homicides. Last year in 2016, while homicides in El Salvador spiked, Lourdes Colon recorded a month with 0 homicides. We're working to replicate these place-based models throughout communities in the Northern Triangle. Looking even further down the hemisphere, there has really been a remarkable political shift. We have a renewed commitment to U.S.-Argentine relations. President Trump hosted a very successful visit by President Macri last month. The relationship with Peru has also strengthened. President Kuczynski was the first Latin American leader to meet with President Trump, and our countries enjoy a close relationship based on shared values of democracy, security, and human rights. The United States also enjoys a robust partnership with Brazil, with our leaders pursuing an economic growth agenda to create jobs and investment in both countries. Together with Brazil and Switzerland, the U.S. launched a joint investigation into the region's biggest corruption scandal, which surrounds Brazil's Odebrecht company. This shows how a shared regional commitment to democratic processes and good governance. It also underscores the value of strong law enforcement cooperation. In the Caribbean, we also have strong ties. The United States is the primary trading partner for this region and enjoyed a $4.6 billion trading surplus in 2016. However, there are also risks. Rising crime and endemic corruption threaten the stability of governments and deprive citizens of their basic rights to security and good governance. In the Eastern Caribbean, we are focused on dismantling transnational criminal organizations and bolstering police professionalization. We also promote U.S. exports and support opportunities for the private sector to invest. We focus, for example, on increasing the use of reliable, low-cost sources of energy to help spur economic development and create new opportunities for U.S. companies. Let me turn now to Venezuela, which is experiencing an acute political, economic, humanitarian, and social crisis. The people of Venezuela are suffering due to their government's authoritarian repression and poor economic management. 3/4 of Venezuelans have lost weight in the past year because of food scarcity. We are concerned that the government of President Maduro is violating Venezuela's own constitution and is not allowing the opposition to have their voices heard, nor allowing them to organize in a way that expresses the views of the Venezuelan people. Our hemisphere is coming together, though, particularly through the Organization of American States, in defense of democracy and human rights in the region. We have taken formal steps to address the situation in Venezuela by calling for a ministerial level meeting. Even as the Venezuelan regime has announced its intent to withdraw from the OAS and to rewrite the Venezuelan constitution to keep itself in power, we all know the solution to Venezuela's problems is not less democracy, but more democracy. Leaving the OAS will not solve Venezuela's problems. And an autocratic, top-down authoritarian exercise dressed up as a constituent assembly, now having already lost legitimacy at home and abroad, will not help either. The regime remains on a collision course with its peoples and with the region, as long as it refuses to listen to the voices of the Venezuelan people. We call upon the government of Venezuela to fulfill the commitments it has made to hold prompt elections, respect its constitution and the role of the National Assembly, provide for the immediate and unconditional release of political prisoners, and tend to the humanitarian needs of the Venezuelan people. Our hemisphere is not immune to external global threats either, whether it be terrorism or cyber attacks. But we are fortunate enough that we can face them together. We can leverage our partnerships to advance globally. Panama and Canada, for example, are active members of the global coalition to defeat ISIS. We recently announced the creation of a cyber policy working group with Argentina, which will focus on cybersecurity issues. In a world with more fluid borders, it is imperative we stand together to defend against these threats. We have a busy schedule ahead of us in this hemisphere. The United States is committed to engaging with the region based on shared priorities that are vital to the interest of all our respective countries. As business leaders and government officials who follow this hemisphere, I thank you for your continued partnership, and I look forward to pressing ahead alongside with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we would like to have some questions from the audience. So if you can raise your hand and press the button if you wanted to ask a question. Alejandro. So there will be mics circulating. Yeah.
Thanks. Alejandro, I'm from Mexico. Well, thanks. First of all, thank you, Paco, for being here with us and letting us share time with you. As a Mexican citizen, I feel a lot of comfort knowing that we have in the State Department a partner for our country, and for that I thank you. My question would be, how do you perceive the relationship between the President and the State Department, and what kind of a partnership are you guys going to have between Trump and yourself?
I think the State Department has a strong relationship with the President, and it starts at the top, with Secretary Tillerson engaged very closely with the White House and with the National Security Council on a regular basis, whether it's Mexico, Venezuela, Canada issues, Argentina, Peru. Last week the Secretary met with the Chilean Foreign Minister. We have an ongoing agenda here at the State Department that is reflective of the President's foreign policy priorities, and we coordinate and work very closely with our colleagues at the National Security Council to ensure that our messages are being coordinated. I think it's been incredibly helpful to our diplomatic effort throughout the hemisphere, the way the President has engaged with leaders, and in every engagement, President Trump raises the crisis in Venezuela as something that the hemisphere collectively has to address. And so my answer is we're working very closely with the White House, and I think we have a clear sense of what our priorities are, working together to execute the President's foreign policy goals and objectives.
Other questions? Yes.
Okay, this your current ambassador to Mexico. If you ratify her, we'd love to have her as long as you want. But if you have plans to change it, what would be a schedule or a calendar to change to strengthen the relationship even more on a daily basis?
Roberta Jacobson is the ideal ambassador to be in Mexico right now, and there are no plans to change her at this time. She is doing an excellent job in helping us understand the opportunities in Mexico. I don't think we have a more qualified person at the State Department who understands Mexico, who knows Mexico the way she does. And we are relying on her and her embassy to help us manage and guide our comprehensive relationship with Mexico in the period ahead. And I can tell you that she is a key person in helping us do that.
Other question. Do you need to ratify her? Does that language exist here in the United States diplomacy, ratifying your ambassador?
No, she was appointed and confirmed by the United States Senate, and she will stay in place. She serves at the pleasure of the President of the United States, and she will be remaining in her position. Okay, I get to escape the firing line the way Senator Rubio did too, as well, I guess.
Yes, there's another
Oh.
question over here. Where's the mic?
Thanks. Paco, Charles Shapiro. You've got tons of large U.S. and Latin American businesses here in the room. Can you talk about the administration and the private sector in Latin America and what you're doing together?
Yeah, that's a great question, Charles. I think this conference in Miami in June is a really critical opportunity, important opportunity to highlight how the administration wants to engage with both the U.S. Private sector and the private sector in Central America. As we look at the region, one of the issues the administration is concerned about is ensuring that migration be safe, legal, and orderly. And in order to do that, the conference in June that looks at Central America is really going to take a hard look at what some of those drivers of irregular migration are. And one of the areas that we know we all need to do more, both governments and the private sector, is invest in economic growth and job creation in Central America. There's a rather large demographic wave of youth that are coming of age over the rest of this decade. And if we aren't putting both government and private sector resources to creating more equitable economic opportunity, particularly job creation in Central America, we're going to continue to see this flow of irregular migration north. And so I think it's significant that the administration has made Central America an early priority, building on some of the work that we've done at the end of the last administration, but putting its own stamp on that engagement. And I think that the area where you'll see that most pronounced is in the role that we're going to ask the region's private sector to step up and play in Central America through greater investments in an infrastructure fund so that you can facilitate and accelerate intra and inter-regional trade.
Questions? Yes, Daniel.
What changes, if any, do you anticipate in the U.S.-Cuba relationship?
Well, the administration is in the midst of a comprehensive policy review, so it's a little premature for me to talk about the changes that the policy review will come to. But I think we heard some of the concerns that Senator Rubio expressed in his remarks, and as we work through that review, I suspect that there will be important differences that will emerge between how this administration plans to address the situation in Cuba. I think one of the areas that is going to be a high priority is ensuring that Cuba continues makes more substantive progress towards a greater respect for human rights inside the country. I think that's certainly one area where you're going to see a heightened emphasis when the review is completed.
Sorry, other question over there.
Thank you very much. Guillermo Roshinsky from the Inter-American Development Bank. I wonder if you might comment on what we've seen in the region over the course of the last decade with much greater Chinese presence as an investor, particularly, focused on 2 or 3 main countries. But in the context of State Department's consultations with the Chinese, do you see them as an agent to potentially play a constructive role, for example, in the situation such as that we find in Venezuela today?
China's interest in, economic and commercial relations in the hemisphere is well documented. It's clearly growing, and that kind of competition is one that I think the United States is really well prepared to engage in and compete in. In terms of our diplomatic consultations with China, there are a lot of issues on that Chinese U.S. agenda, and clearly we'd like to engage in a broader, deeper discussion about China's role in the Western Hemisphere, and we will as we work through some of the other issues on the Chinese U.S. agenda. And hopefully China can play a more constructive role. But I think for the moment, our focus is getting them to play a more constructive role in another part of the world that is a higher priority.
We have 2 questions in the back.
Well, the president's spoken with President Temer twice now, before and after his inauguration. I think one of the things we're keen to move forward on is a joint economic growth and job creation agenda in both countries. We have a large trade surplus with Brazil, but there are lots of areas where we have industrial and manufacturing cooperation that's ongoing. U.S. investment is a significant component of the Brazilian economy, and likewise, there's $22 to $24 billion of Brazilian investment in the United States. So there are lots of areas where we think we can expand the trade and commercial relationship with Brazil, and I think that's where the priority is going to be. One area that we're working hard on is in defense industrial cooperation with Brazil, and hopefully that can yield some areas for immediate return.
Okay, we have time for one last question in the back.
Paco, Ramon Sartucho with Ford Motor Company. Thank you for your comments. You, as well as Senator Rubio, did well in outlining and making the case that the prosperity of our neighbors, the prosperity of the hemisphere is in the interest of the United States. As the United States recalibrates, as you sort of highlighted, our existing relationships, be they economic, political, trade-related, clearly, are you confident that we can do so in a way that still keeps that in mind?
I'm absolutely confident that a foreign policy that's based on our national security and our economic prosperity is a natural fit for our interests throughout this hemisphere and for the way this hemisphere engages. We have shared priorities in all of these areas, and I think it's safe to say that we can construct a win-win-win situation for both the United States and for our partners throughout the hemisphere, whether it's on trade, whether it's on national security, whether it's on economic prosperity. Our economic well-being, as all of the private sector people know here, I've talked to many U.S. private sector companies that get the highest return and profits out of their investments in this hemisphere. And so I think that agenda is one that can yield good results for the United States, but also for our partners in the region. And I'm very optimistic that that's what this administration intends to pursue moving forward.
Okay, on that optimistic note, please join me in giving a big hand for Acting Assistant Secretary of State, Francisco Palmieri.